There's all sorts of rumors going on about the Harold B. Lee Library and what happens on different floors of the library, specifically the sixth floor and restricted sections with special materials. Well, the Daily Universe reporter went and met with the library director, who basically debunked every single rumor.
Looking for a cool, delicious way to beat the summer heat? Try Postum's refreshing cold beverages. Enjoy a creamy Postum frappe made with milk and just the right touch of sweetener for a smooth, energizing treat. Or dive into a rich Postum milkshake, perfect for those sunny days when you want something tasty and satisfying. Postum gives you that delightful caffeine-free boost with every sip. This summer, chill out with Postum. Refreshment you can feel good about.
Welcome to This Week in Mormons, the Twim Taffy Edition. This is your host, Tiffany Hales, and I am here with my Taffy Edition, which stands for Tiffany and Friends for You. Today, I have invited John Bernheisel back on our podcast. He's been here with me 2 or 3 different times, and so I wanted him specifically to come back today because John has some major life changes that occurred in May, and we're going to let him share that and just talk about what's going on in his life, and then I'll talk about mine, and we'll do some news stories, John, and just chat about what's happened in the last week.
All right. Hey, thanks again. It's nice to see you again, Tiffany. So I've been a teacher and a coach and a librarian and a computer guy for the last 36 years. And I walked out of the school for the last time. I drove my riding lawnmower to school on the last day of school. And so I'm retired. And for about 2.5 weeks, it's been really weird. I got to spend 6 days watching my grandsons, and it's been kind of interesting. We'll see when school starts and I don't go back. Then it'll feel a little bit more real. But right now it's been fun. Had beautiful weather. I've been working in my yard and hanging out with my kids, and it's been good.
That is awesome. Yeah, I can imagine packing up your classroom and all your stuff, because I would assume normally you just leave that there over the summer.
Yeah, yeah.
So packing up your classroom must have been like, this is kind of weird.
It was, you accumulate as a science teacher, you accumulate so much just stuff, and it's like, well, is this abalone shell mine, or is this the school's? And I ended up just leaving everything, and so it was pretty emotional and a little weird. I got lots of nice recognitions,
Aw.
and so it's been a lot of mixed emotions, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. We will have to check back with you in the fall, because I think you're right. As a teacher, you're kind of used to having the summer off. And so we'll check back with you in the fall when school starts up and you're like, what am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
Although I have a feeling you will find many things to entertain yourself.
Well, so I'll add a little bit to the story. So literally 3 days after the last day of school, um, the bishop wants to talk to me, and that's very rarely great news. And so he asked me to, I don't even know what it's called. I'm the ward outdoor specialist.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
for 20 years, I was either the scoutmaster or the young men's president or one of the count. I felt like I was in young men's for like from the time I was 25 to 45. So I've kind of had a break, and but I was involved in every aspect of scouting. And of course, it's not Boy Scouts of America anymore, and so the bishop called me in. He kind of said, our ward hasn't done a really great job with outdoor activities the last, since scouting. What's that? 4 or 5 years since the church changed the scouting program, and he needs a jump start. We need to do some backpacking trips, and we need to do. And I said, "Does it mean winter camping?" And he said, "Well, you should probably do one."
Oh gosh.
So anyway, we're still trying to figure out what it means. Um, and so I think we're going to do a backpacking trip in right at the first week of August, and that'll be kind of how we kick it off. So this summer we have to plan it and make sure kids have backpacks and all
Hmm.
the things. So that's how I'm feeling. My retirement is winter camping.
Wow. Winter camping. So, well, I am actually headed for a youth outdoor specialty thing this weekend. For some reason, they decided in our ward that the youth wanted to learn some rock climbing. So they've been, going to local gyms that have rock climbing walls. And we are headed tomorrow morning down to the City of Rocks, which is a state park in Idaho that's just a little bit south and east of Burley. And the kids are going to do rock climbing. I, of course, am not going to do rock climbing. My husband and I are going because we are going to cook for the youth. So we have been assembling all of our food, all of our cooking gear, all of that. We have to get that all packed up tonight and get ready to go
How many people are you
because
feeding?
only 20.
Well,
So
that's not.
not that's not bad. And then I have a break for a week, and then the week after that, we're going to girls camp, and we are feeding 30 people for 3.5 days at girls camp. So once I get girls camp over with, I will have been through my major push for the summer. My daughter is getting married on September 7th, and I have done practically zero wedding planning. And I keep telling her, "You're moving up the list, darling. You're moving up the list." And so I'm like, okay, after I get girls camp over with, I got 10 weeks to figure out a wedding. I can do that. So that's that's my current adventure.
Well, congratulations. And yeah, we sometimes have to live one week at a time when we're busy.
Exactly. Now, you also have a training you are going to tonight that you kind of hinted to me a little bit about. Tell me about this training because I'm a little bit fascinated by
So,
this.
so it's not a training I'm going to; it's training I'm giving.
Oh,
I
even
am.
better.
Yeah. I've always loved family history, genealogy. I've always loved that, but also being involved in the schools, and I use ChatGPT so much in the school, and like I used it for teaching physics and lots of stuff. So 4 or 5 months ago, I started playing with these ideas on how to use ChatGPT to help us do family history, and it's amazing. It is literally life changing. I'm not sure how to share it because there is just so much cool things. I'm doing that in like 2 hours, and I'm talking to you now, and so my mind's a little so. But like, I printed out my great grandfather has his patriarchal blessing, and it's handwritten in beautiful. That script they had in
Mhm.
the 1870s, beautiful, but I can read cursive, but this is tough. You can take a photo of it with ChatGPT. It'll transcribe the whole thing for you. And
Shut up. It
oh,
does not.
oh, all the remember like 20 years ago we all did what'd you call it when you had to read the little lines on the family history things? We called it indexing. Remember all the
Yes.
index? Take a
Yes.
picture with your phone. It'll do it all for you. The indexing is gone. And then I also said, because my grandpa's family history or his patriarchal blessing was kind of long, I said, give me the 10 best points that came out in his patriarchal blessing. And it was so beautiful. It was a new way to look at it. It put it in language that I could do, but I'll give you a teaser. That's not a tenth of the family history tools that are available on ChatGPT. And I have not talked to anybody else. These are all just things that I figured out because I'm a computer nerd and kind of a math nerd, and so I don't know. We can do another podcast sometime, and I'll share with you. But I'm giving the lesson tonight in 2 hours. And
Oh
I'm
my
not
gosh.
very well prepared for that either. But I'm giving a
I
lesson for all the stake family history people on how to use
Okay,
it.
I think we may have to return and revisit this because AI and the way that the world is moving in that direction
Yeah.
is so fascinating to me. And it's really one of those things that if you don't get on board, you're going to get left behind. And I feel like I'm starting to get left behind. And I would love to know some of your tools and tricks for using it with family history. So maybe we'll have to do a whole podcast where we just kind of talk about that to
Yeah.
kind of just introduce the listeners to that concept, because I think that's fascinating. I am also now 100% convinced that in no way, shape, or form will you be bored during retirement.
Yeah. I have to say a funny story. We were in Sunday school a couple weeks ago, and somehow like AI came up or something, and this nice kind of older than me gentleman he goes, all these tools like AI and Chat GPT, they're all of Satan.
Oh, gosh.
And all I said was, no, 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 no. That's all I said. And it's his wife that asked me to give the presentation. So anyway, so
Now
hopefully I
that
can prove that
is
family
some funny
doing,
stuff.
doing family history is a good thing. So anyway,
Okay.
I'll share later.
I love it. All right, let's talk about a few news stories since that's what we're here for. The first news story that I'm going to talk about, this is breaking, like as in today. I saw this news story. So, as you know, the church is periodically releasing new hymns for the new hymnal, and they released 11 more today. And so, if you go on the church news website, you will see those hymns, and there's some that we recognize, some that we don't. There's a Christmas hymn that's called Still, Still, Still. And the Tabernacle Choir has sung that several times. So I think that that will be familiar to people. There's also one called His Voice as the Sound. And apparently, this is also a hymn that has been performed by the Tabernacle Choir, including October Conference 2018. Now, this is really fascinating to me. I'm going to have to go listen to this one. It's called I'm Going to Live So God Can Use Me. And apparently, it is an African spiritual in the style of This Little Light of Mine. I love
Oh,
This
I'm a
Little
fan
Light of
then.
Mine.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, exactly. And it was featured in the 2022 Friend to Friend broadcast. And then there is another hymn called Oh, How Great Is Our Joy. And this was originally written in Spanish by a Mexican Latter day Saint missionary. It's currently included in the Spanish hymn book. And so it is a favorite among our Spanish speaking saints. And so it will now be offered in all languages. So I really liked that. I really like that the new hymn book is becoming so inclusive of other cultures, of songs that are popular in other religions, and that it just seems to be um, it's just inclusive, I guess, is the best way to describe it. There is something in there for everyone. And I think that that's fantastic.
Did they say that we're going to have drums and saxophones in sacrament meeting anytime soon? That didn't get dropped.
We
No.
haven't gotten that far yet. But there's hope.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I routinely ask this of guests that I have on the podcast. What, if anything, is your ward doing to get people familiar with these new hymns?
So like everybody else, we have like for a little folder, a little,
Yeah.
yeah, with about 40 copies, just Xerox copies of the new ones, and probably once every other week we sing a new one, and they're ones that I just don't know. I've grown up my entire life in the church, and so I'm not familiar with them. So I'm the kind of guy that like just sing the same 20 hymns over and over, and but I am excited about some of the African spirituals and some of the more inclusive things we have. I think um, that's awesome. But yeah, I think we're doing about the same thing everybody else is. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, we are doing that. One new thing that we started this last week is we are trying to, in Relief Society, so at least on the 2 weeks that we have Relief Society, have someone come in and either sing the new hymn, one of the new hymns, or at least play the new hymns. And we did that for the first time last week in Relief Society, and I thought it was fantastic because, first of all, it exposed us to the music. Second, it really brought the spirit. We did that after our introduction,
Uh-huh.
after we made announcements, before we turned the time over to the teacher. And it just really helped to bring the spirit. And I realized how much I have been missing music in Relief Society.
Good. That's awesome. They don't do it
So,
in the elders quorum, I'm guessing.
well, the charge for by our bishop was that both Elders Quorum and Relief Society were supposed to do this. Now, it was up to the organizations to decide how they wanted to do it. So I don't know what the Elders Quorum is doing. I can only speak for the Relief Society.
Very good. Well played.
So, all right, our next story, Sister Elaine Jack. As many of you may recall, she was the Relief Society General President from 1990 to 1997. Before that, she had served in the General Presidency of the Young Women's Organization from 87 to 90. So basically, she had 10 years of equivalent general authority service. She passed away on the 10th. So she passed away 2 days ago. She was 97 years old. So I think we could say that she lived a fantastic life. Um, I don't remember too much about her presidency. I mean, during this time when she was a Relief Society president, I would have been in my early 20s, my early to mid to late 20s. And so I have to admit, I wasn't as tuned into Relief Society during that particular time in my life as I am now. But I don't have any negatives feelings about her. So there are others that I might
There you
have
go.
some less than positive feelings.
Uh,
Anyway,
well, there you go. I did look it up just because I'm curious about these sort of things. For most of her time, Gordon B. Hinckley was the president of the church. But
yes.
for a little while, it was Howard W. Hunter. And she was initially called by Ezra Taft Benson.
Wow.
And the other little bit of trivia that I found was that she was the General Relief Society president when the Proclamation on the Family came out.
Oh, yeah,
And
that would make sense because I think
yeah,
that came
and
out in 95, if I
yep, in
recall
'95.
correctly.
So she would have
Yeah,
been involved with that to whatever extent. So that was
exactly.
awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, so sad for her family. It's always sad to lose a loved one, but life well lived. So
Did you
that's
say
awesome.
she was 97 years
She
old?
was 97 years old. So you can't
I'm
complain
going to
if
be
you make
ready
it
to
to
go.
97.
Yeah. Okay. Um, all the best.
Yes. Okay, the next one, we've got a leader who passed away on a camping trip. And since you are now the young men's outdoor specialist, um,
Yeah.
let's talk about
So,
this story and
so
maybe what to avoid.
yeah. So this is sad. This is terrible. So a man, he was 38 years old. His name was Alex Johnson. Um, he was the father of four small children, and they were on a ward camping trip. I looked at several articles and it just said ward camping trip or a church camping trip, and he was staying in a camper, and and he sadly was found dead the next morning. They're pretty sure that it was carbon monoxide poisoning. I guess it was a pretty cold night, and they think maybe he had tried to. He had a cooker and some charcoal briquettes and was trying to heat up the camper a little bit, but um, so it wasn't a church zone camp. It was just a campground. He was a baseball coach and just really seemed like a good guy. I noticed in one of the articles that a GoFundMe campaign would be, and I have it up right now. And right now, the current total is $95,941.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I thought that was amazing. So he was from
The vineyard area, I believe,
yeah
if I recall
yeah,
correctly.
and so great that his community's helping his wife and his four kids
Yep.
as they struggle with this. But yeah, so please be careful on your camping trips, and all the best to his family. Stuff. So there's your dogs.
There's my dogs. My daughter is, I banished them before we recorded, but my daughter just came home from work. And so they like to greet people. All right. Now we've got our next two stories. These are stories just for you, John, because they're in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, so I think I've said several times I'm from Wyoming, and I love the state. And as I was like you, we prep for looking for news items, and right or wrong, every article related to the church has the word Mormon in it. So I was searching for the word Mormon in news, and so I found a headline about a photograph and that was taken of the Milky Way galaxy above the Teton Mountains and what is called Mormon Row. And
Okay. I've
so,
never heard of that.
so, um, so I've seen that related to the Teton Mountains. So as you drive between Jackson Hole and Yellowstone Park, you see the amazing Teton Mountains. Of course, if you're from Idaho, you think the Teton Mountains face west, but they actually face east. Um, but so I just happened to notice this, but I think the significant part is I didn't realize there was a settlement of the church in the 1890s right there in what is now Teton Park. Okay.
Okay.
So um, a lot of homesteaders, I can't remember. I think Jackson Hole's like at 8,500 feet. I don't know how anyone would try to raise anything there. But in 1890, there was 27 families that went and made claim on this area. And this is probably, I don't know if you can see this. This is probably the picture we're most familiar with if you've ever seen this is the Teton Mountains, and this barn here is one of the last things remaining from this little settlement called Mormon Row was the name of the
Mm,
town.
okay.
And they're all the people are gone. There's a few buildings and stuff, but there's a historic center there in Teton National Park, and and the photography there is unbelievable. And so great thing. Went to Teton Park on my honeymoon, partly.
Well, no wonder it feels so special to you.
That's right. That's
All
right.
right, let's move on to Cody, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Now
So
we've had a
go
lot of
ahead.
controversy there. So,
Yeah, so I live about an hour from Cody, and there's three stakes up here in northwestern Wyoming, and when they announced the Cody Temple, I think more than 5 years ago, um, like all the temples, it takes 2 or 3 years to get going, but I'd say the temple, just an update, is probably about half done. We drove past it the other day. They're it's a prefabricated forms that they're bringing in and they're stacking up, and you're starting to see the, the whole shape of the temple. And they have a couple there in a trailer that comes in, and it's a little visitor center where you can come in and see. But anyway, so the news story is there was a man, his name is Barry Cook, and he had been in public service for 45 years, and most recently as the Cody City Administrator. He's not a member of the church, and um, so I read an article about his retirement and all the things he'd worked in Green River, and worked in Rollins, and he's been in Cody for the last 11 years, and he kind of had a moment, and obviously because it's Cody and it's the temple, it's controversial and newsworthy, and he said that his sort of one regret is that he handed over the decision of the Cody temple to the head of the planning board, who he knew was LDS. So, and he said to this man, "Can you be totally impartial?" And I don't know the name, and I wouldn't say it if I knew it. And so it was. We have lots of friends in Cody, and sort of on both sides of this story. And I wish that bringing the temple in was this moment of citywide joy and celebration. But in a lot of ways, I've seen a lot of friendships being torn apart over this really, divisive moment. And it's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of struggles. But this man, I felt bad that he 45 years in public service, and yet his sort of one regret was that he didn't handle this as well as he should. But the end story is that the temple is being built, and um, the people I know who are in my my networking says that their best guess is it'll be done next spring, probably dedicated sometime in the spring or summer of 2026.
That's awesome.
So the Cody Temple is continuing, and but that's all the Wyoming news I have today, I think. So.
Well, and hopefully after that temple gets built, and I'm sure this is the case now because it's been approved and it's being building, that some of the emotion will
Oh,
kind of settle down. And hopefully once it's built and everybody gets used to it and,
absolutely.
maybe perhaps tours it in the open house, that a lot of the negativity that came along with that will settle down and that people can be like, okay, it's all right.
Yeah, yeah, and it always seems to happen. It's just it's so close to home and people I know, and but it is in a beautiful spot. It'll be as you leave Yellowstone Park and come into Cody, you'll see it up on the hill,
Wow.
and um, it's going to be a sight, and
Awesome.
steeple and everything. So yep, that's my update from my home state here.
Okay. All right. Well, next we are going to move on to BYU runners and track and field because I just really love BYU track and field. BYU gets a lot of notoriety for its basketball and its football, but as I have talked about in the podcast before, they have probably one of the most premier track and field programs in the United States of America that used to go to the University of Oregon, but BYU has kind of sucked up and usurped that title. So the first story that I have on that vein is about Kenneth Rooks. Now, he's a former BYU runner. He's not currently at BYU. He was the silver medalist last year in the steeplechase. Anyway, he recently spoke to a bunch of students at the Y Sports Camp on how his faith and resilience played a role in his running career. And I really liked that because I am all about resilience. I think, one of probably the best indicators and predictors of success in life is your ability to be resilient because life is going to throw all sorts of crap at you all day long. And so if you have that ability to be resilient, and I think it's like any other skill that we have, unfortunately, the more that we practice it, the better we get. Anyway, and so I thought it was really interesting because he said that even that actually he really did not like running at first. Here he is, this world-class athlete, and he is not a fan of running. He says, I hated workouts. I hated how nervous I got before races. Sometimes I hated how much it hurt, but I had to learn to embrace being uncomfortable. One thing that helped me embrace being uncomfortable was my faith. And that just really resonated with me because how often do we try and avoid uncomfortable situations? And maybe we have to look and say, why am I trying to avoid this uncomfortable situation? Is it going to force me to grow in a way that I don't want to grow? And so that's why I'm trying to avoid this uncomfortable situation? Or why is it I'm uncomfortable? And if the reason is because I need to grow in that direction and I don't want to grow in that direction, I really like how he says, my faith helped me embrace being uncomfortable. And I thought that was just and for those teenage kids at a Y Sports camp to hear that, I thought that was great. The other thing he said is he said failing is part of the process. And not every time has he been successful. He had a race where he fell down and then he made a decision after that race, okay, the next time I fall down, I'm going to do things differently. And I really liked that. And I guess it really resonated with me today because I had an oral argument this morning on a legal case and it did not go as I had hoped that it would go. And in large part due to a series of missteps that occurred by myself in my office. And so after the oral argument was over with, I went back to my office and I gathered my staff around and I said, let's talk about what we learned from this. Unfortunately, it was a minor issue. It wasn't anything major, but I said, let's talk about what we learned from this and what our takeaway is for the future. Because I honestly feel like if you understand the cause of every failure, that will help you be more successful in the future. And part of being successful is not only winning, but learning from those times where you have made mistakes. And so my staff and I sat down and we were like, okay. And there was plenty of, I don't want to say blame to go around because I hate the word blame. There was plenty of learning opportunities for everybody to go around. And so we took this situation and turned it into a very positive for us that I hope will help us all to be more resilient. And so I think that's why this article and what he said to those kids really just resonated with me and why I just really liked it. I mean, I've been a fan of his since even before the Olympics. I became a fan of his when he fell down in the NCAA championships 2 years ago and got up and won the race. Because again, so much to be learned by when you fall, you don't stop. You get up and you push forward. And that goes to the resilience that he talked about. So
Yeah.
big fan of Kenneth Rooks.
Yeah, I love the article, and as a runner all my life, and as a running coach for 30 something years, I resonated with it. But I was thinking about sort of the uncomfortable part and how we're pushed into situations that I went on a mission and I had to learn a language and I had to knock on doors of people I didn't know, and I think of all the lessons I've given and all the times I've had to speak in church, and where none of us are going to choose that. There's not very many people who volunteer. I'd like to speak in sacrament meeting next month, but the reality is even as a teacher, I can see the kids that have had those experiences and the kids that aren't as nervous in front of a classroom or do those things. And so there's growth that happens, and sometimes we don't want that growth, but the church does do all those positive things that help us.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right. Well, speaking of a runner and being a track coach, you will love the next story, which is BYU is taking a strong contingent to this week's NCAA track and field championships. Um, the Ed Eyestone said, I believe this is from Ed Eyestone. Our men could be top 15 and our women could be top 4 if the big guns show up. And then they listed the big guns, who are Megan Hunter, Lexi Lowry, James Corrigan. They would have had a fourth one, Casey Klinger, but Casey turned pro in the middle of the season. So, but that still has not derailed their chances to have very successful NCAA track and field championships. So again, we will be watching that. James Corrigan, he also went to the Olympics last year. That's another name that we have thrown around a lot on the podcast. He is a bright young star in track and field, still in college, still working his way through BYU, but undoubtedly we will probably see him in the Olympics again, and we will probably see him turn pro. So best of luck to BYU track and field.
I need to brag for just 1 second, and then mention Casey Klinger, just one other thing. But a long, long time ago in 1983, I think, I ran a 10K race, a 6 mile race in Provo, and I got second, which I was pretty excited about. And the winner of the race was Ed Eyestone.
Okay, that
So
is definitely a humble brag because I say mad props because
yes.
I cannot say enough fantastic about Ed Eyestone. I just think he's a wonderful coach.
Yeah, so I've obviously followed his career as an Olympian, and then, I mean, he was a great runner, but I think he's a one of the very best coaches, and
Exactly.
sometimes great athletes don't make great coaches, and
Hmm.
but he's definitely both. But I just wanted to comment on. So you mentioned Casey Klinger. He went pro, and I still don't understand how some NCAA basketball players are making $6 million, but that's not pro. This whole NIL contract thing is it's just beyond me. But I wanted to share the times. So the school record, the BYU 10-kilometer, again, the 10K record for the last 45 years was 27 minutes and 45 seconds. So Ed Eyestone hold that record for 45 years. Casey Klinger broke the record by 34 seconds.
Holy cow, that's
34 seconds.
huge.
So the BYU record is now 27:11. And then I did the math, and that's a 4:23 mile for 6.2 miles.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't
Wow.
come to close to that for 1 mile, but BYU, all those, it said, so this is NCAA track. The article didn't talk about their pole vaulters or their
Hmm.
shot putters or their sprinters. It talked about their distance runners,
Yes.
and of course they won the men's and women's national championship in cross country last fall. But it's fun. I love distance running, and so it's exciting to me. But 27:11 for a 10K. Oh my goodness. I just,
Yeah.
even when I was in my most fit, I wouldn't have even thought of being within 4 minutes of that. So, but
Well, and you got to think Ed Eyestone as the coach probably isn't feeling too bad that an athlete that he
yeah,
coached
yeah,
broke his record.
exactly. Yeah, got beat by his own athlete. So very cool.
Exactly. Exactly. As he could say, like, it's like as a parent when your child does something good. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of credit for that because I
Yeah,
helped you along the way.
a lot of credit.
Exactly. Okay, our next one. Oh, you were going to talk about this one. This one it's sad but happy. We have a service missionary.
Yeah, so this is about a young man named Spencer Blatchard, BLAN Blanchard. He's in the Oregon Salem Mission, and I just, it breaks my heart. He has stage 4 cancer. The article doesn't say a lot. It doesn't like say what his prognosis is, but they wouldn't have had this article if
Yeah.
it wasn't very dire. And he has chosen to. It says to he's going through chemotherapy treatments for metastatic neuroblastoma, stage 4 cancer, while serving as a service mission.
Yeah.
And
I believe he had been called as a service missionary, and it was 5 days after he was called, they discovered his cancer had a relapse. He had previously beaten cancer, but he wanted to stay on this service mission and he wanted to continue his cancer treatments and provide what light he could into the world, which I just think is so fantastic. And that's one of the things that I love about the service mission program that the church has adopted. A general proselyting mission doesn't it's not a one size fits all. And so to be able to have these other opportunities where there are things that like what this young man can do to serve a mission and to feel important. And I can't help but think while he's going through his cancer treatment to have this to focus on as a higher, bigger priority, that's got to help him through his cancer treatment. So I I love that part of it.
I agree, but I'll tell you that if I have stage 4 cancer, I'm going to sit on my back deck in my lawn chair and drink Diet Coke and play on my cell phone. I am not going to do a service mission, but yeah, Diet Coke will be my chemotherapy, but my heart goes out to him and his
Yeah,
family. It's a very heartwarming story.
yeah.
Very, very brave kid, and I hope the best for him for sure.
Well, and as you know, I agree with you on the Diet Coke. I always joke, just hook me up to an IV of Diet Coke, we'll be
That's
just
right.
fine.
That's right. So
Okay, so our next story is kind of a fun story out of the Daily Universe, which is the newspaper for BYU. And the title of it is Library Staff Reveals Secrets of the Harold B. Lee Library. Now, anybody who has attended BYU knows that there's all sorts of rumors going on about the Harold B. Lee Library and what happens on different floors of the library, specifically the sixth floor and restricted sections with special materials. Well, the Daily Universe reporter went and met with the library director, who basically debunked every single rumor. So, first of all, they talked about the basement and, ooh, the creepy basement. What's in the creepy basement? Apparently, in the creepy basement is AC units and fans. That's what's in the creepy basement. And then he also had a word to say about the locked collections. And the library director said, well, people always think it's full of sketchy books and witchcraft. But once I got to see it, it was hugely disappointing. In reality, it's mostly unbound texts and pop up books, things that could be easily damaged. So that's what they keep under lock and key, not the sketchy books and the witchcraft. Also, the sixth floor has a big sign that says no public access. So you would think, oh, we can keep BYU's biggest, darkest, deepest secrets in there. However, apparently on the sixth floor, it's just filled with orderly cubicles. And in those cubicles, new books are being processed and cataloged. And the only intimidating part of that area is the auditing office. So I thought it was kind of funny. The other thing that he was talking about is that as more materials are digitalized, the library space is used for other purposes. And so records are transferred to some of the spaces. They've got shelves that are filled with thousands upon thousands of things like laser discs, which were predecessors to DVDs, which you and I probably remember. But you ask your kid what a laser disc is, and they're going to look at you like, what are you talking about?
Where do the 8 tracks fit in on this story?
Exactly. I don't know.
Or it's level 5.
They didn't discuss 8 tracks. All right. Now we are going to move on to one of my favorite categories, which is Mormons in the media. So we've kind of finished with our hardcore news stories that weren't very hardcore. And I have to say, I think it was Kurt that talked about this a few weeks ago. Really, the news in 2025 for the church has been so quiet.
Yeah.
Like, we are legit almost 6 months into the year, and it's all just been kind of fluffy, feel good,
Nice.
nothing super controversial. And so when you do a weekly podcast about news, it has been a bit challenging to find juicy material that you can, really sink your teeth into. So probably one of the reasons why I created this category called Mormons in the Media, because we still seem to see an onslaught of all sorts of Mormons in general media like television, but specifically in social media like TikTok. So, the first story we are going to cover tonight, if you are a longtime listener, you know my sister and I talk incessantly about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. One of those Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Lisa Barlow, her son was on a mission, and I want to say he was in Argentina. I know
It was Columbia.
Colombia. I knew he was definitely Spanish speaking. Anyway, he just returned from his mission in Colombia. There's a whole bunch of pictures out there on the internet of the family greeting him at the airport, and hugs and loves and kisses. I have no doubt that the Bravo cameras were there recording the whole thing. The only thing that I thought was so hilarious when I saw the pictures is I was looking at his footwear. And, normally, because I think this is probably part of the little white booklet that the missionaries have, they're supposed to wear shoes with socks. And theoretically, these should be dark socks and dark shoes. At least that's typically what I've seen. He was wearing some white loafers, no socks. And I was like, well, that's a different look. Is that a coming home look, or did you sport that on your mission? Anyway.
That's interesting. I didn't, you're more observant than I am, but we saw sister missionaries the other day walking around wearing pants and like nice shirts. And that still blows my mind. And then we had our first spotting of the sleeveless, sleeveless garments in our ward the other day. And I don't know, it's,
They're
yep,
popping up everywhere.
they're sneaking out of those hot countries and into Wyoming, I guess. So
Exactly.
But
Anyway, I will just say one thing because I can't remember if Harry Ann and I talked about this. Lisa Barlow did talk about her son's mission on last season, and he was thoroughly enjoying the mission. He loved the people. He told his parents, he's like, I don't want to come home. I'm loving this. So it'll be really interesting to follow him now that he's post home or now that he's home, and to see how he gets incorporated into the show.
what's her connection to the church? She's
So
active or
Uh, she 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 has what she calls Mormonism 2.0. So her husband was raised in the church. I believe she was a convert at some point in her youth. I believe they met at BYU. They were married in the temple, and since then they haven't per se left the church, but they don't engage in what you would call your stereotypical Mormon behavior. They own a tequila company. Uh, but she has this son who went on a mission, and she routinely shows up in her ward and she talks about that uh, on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And she's just kind of unabashed about how she chooses to live her brand of Mormonism. And I'm like,
good,
well,
good for her. Good for her.
good for her.
I've managed to live my entire life without watching a single episode of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, or
Salt
the
Lake City.
or what's the other one?
Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
I have my brain space has two brain cells related to that, and so it's a good
Okay,
thing.
well, stay pure, John. Stay pure. That's all I have to say.
I'm
All
trying.
right. Talk about our next guy. I've never even heard of this guy. So tell me what you know
Oh,
about
are you
this guy.
serious? You've never heard of
I'm
him,
totally
Benson Boone?
serious.
So,
Apparently I live in a vacuum somewhere.
so the article, this is in the Salt Lake Tribune, and the article was kind of trying to be funny, and it wasn't the best work, but so I did a little backstory on Benson Boone, and he raised very LDS. Apparently, and he grew up in Monroe, Washington. I have a daughter who lives in right near there, and but also just coincidentally, his grandparents. My wife knows his grandparents somehow, and they live right here in northern Wyoming. Anyway, he is a huge multimillionaire, has tens of millions of followers on. He kind of got a start in 2021. He's only 23 years old. I don't understand the TikTok world, and I'm not trying to, but he has done several things. He was the, what do you call it? In Taylor Swift's concert, he was the startup band. What do you call that?
Kind of the opening
Yeah,
act.
he was the opening act for a
Okay.
lot of Taylor Swift's tour, most recent tour. But he's also being compared to the lead singer for Queen in and I lost who's the lead singer for Queen?
I think, isn't it Eddie Mercury?
Yeah, Eddie Mercury. Obviously died, but he does backflips on stage, and his vocals are unbelievable. You have to watch a YouTube video of him singing.
Okay.
He is just powerful. And 6 months or so ago, I said to my youngest daughter, who is 20 something, and she's like, "Dad, you've never heard of Benson Boone?" I don't know. Anyway, so I don't suspect that he's living the gospel in the 100% way, but the article
He's
says that
he's living it in the Benson Boone way.
that's right. But they say that he everything he does, like Phil, like the guy who was like, it just reminded me of the Strength of Youth pamphlet and his primary days, and all these sort of things. So this kid, remember that name? He's
Okay.
obviously Mormon adjacent and a huge star, but really a talented singer, and pretty cool story. Good story. There you go.
All right. We are going to move on to another rising LDS TikTok star or LDS adjacent TikTok star. There is a woman, her name is Andrea Merriman, and she talks about how her world came to a stop in 2019 or 2009, I believe. She is now sharing her story on TikTok and she's getting millions of views on her storytime videos. So here's what happened in 2009. She is married to her son, to her husband, Sean. They have four children, the youngest of which was three. She thought her husband was some sort of an investor dealing with money, etc.
And he
Uh,
was the bishop.
and he was the bishop, and they had a very, I kind of gathered, rather opulent lifestyle. Well, come to find out, he was engaged in a Ponzi scheme, and he had been running a $20 million Ponzi scheme for over a decade. So what he did is and he, again, he was the bishop at the time. He turns himself into federal agents, and he was soon imprisoned for fraud. Of course, when that happens, the government quickly seizes and repossesses all of your assets, which he had purchased with the investors' money, which basically left her homeless and penniless. And she says, I remember thinking at the time, I'm humiliated to be married to a criminal. I'm humiliated getting divorced. I'm humiliated going from rags to riches. I'm humiliated to do it in the public eye and have it multiplied. And so she moved to Utah after that with her four children for a fresh start. And so she's sharing her story on TikTok, and she is gaining a bunch of followers.
Yeah, according to this article, she has 70,000 followers. And it's a great story. And again, it's one of those sort of resilience stories that you've been talking about, how overcoming hardship and overcoming um, tough things. But wow, living the good life and thinking your husband goes to work every day, um, and and then finding out that he's living a Ponzi scheme and going out and then confessing to federal authorities. I'm not sure. I tried to figure out why he decided to confess. Doesn't it didn't quite feel like it was a out of guilt thing, but I think that the world was kind of coming down on him, and he was about to
That's
get caught.
that's
And
kind of what I
so,
think too.
yeah, and so I didn't even what state were they in when this was taking
You know
place?
what? The article didn't say what state that they were in, but obviously they were not in Utah because she
Yeah,
moved to Utah after that. So
yeah. So,
pardon me
um,
for anybody watching on video. I'm doing dual duty right now. This is my daughter. And she needs her
hey,
hair braided before she goes to work. So I'm being the mom
all
while
right.
recording a podcast.
Well,
Very on point.
I'll take the next article a little bit. So, uh, this is a man named Dan. This is again TikTok, and we should probably get a This Week in Mormons TikTok account and put some of our clips on there. But so a man named Daniel Spencer, and his whole gig on TikTok has been to go around and ask people sort of uncomfortable questions. And he's done it at BYU, and he does it like in the streets, and he'll just random things. And he asks people questions like, would you rather kill a puppy or would you rather drink a beer? And, and so, it's like, I don't know. It's like, anyway, he asked these really, and I guess the BYU collection of his TikTok videos is so crazily popular. Some of them have 17 million views, which
Wow.
sounds like a lot to me. What do we get, like 9 views on one of these YouTube videos that we're putting together, or 10 views?
Yes. So, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it does. It says sometimes upwards, amasses upwards sometimes of 17 million views in a single post.
yeah.
That's crazy.
A
Absolutely
couple,
crazy.
a couple other things he said. Would you rather enlist in a war or drink coffee? I have to tell a quick story about my mom. We were in Turkey when I was a kid. We traveled in crazy places, and we were in Istanbul, Turkey, and we were all around the table and eating this dinner with this family we met, and traditional Turkish food, amazing food, and everything. And they put out these little cups of what Turkish coffee, just thick,
Hmm.
probably nasty coffee. I'm like 12 years old, and my mom tried to explain to him that they didn't drink coffee, and of course in Turkey that just meant nothing. It's like, what? You don't drink coffee anyway. So she um, she didn't refuse to drink the coffee. She drank the coffee and then quickly drank mine so that she would get the sin and that I would be free from sin. So if I make it to heaven and my mom doesn't, it'll be because of that little sip of Turkish coffee that she had one time a while ago. That's what this story made. The other thing, another funny thing that he said, again, he's asking like, I went to BYU and I went on like 10 dates the whole time, but he's interviewing these girls and they said, yeah, I was on 5 dates last week. And I'm thinking, and so anyway, this whole collection of LDS themed videos is just really funny. He asked, um, when you get to heaven, which planet are you going to pick? And then he debates with them which planet would be better to pick. And so the headline is BYU sex, alcohol, and swearing on TikTok. So
Fascinating.
mindless, yeah, mindless stuff.
Fascinating. All right, let's get to Mormons behaving badly. I got two things in this category today. So, first of all, there was a young missionary who was hit by a car. I believe that was I can't remember if it was North Carolina or South Carolina. It was in one of the Carolinas.
Stuff.
South Carolina. That's what I was thinking. Um, and they did not immediately catch the driver after it happened. They have subsequently caught the driver. Charges have been filed against him, and so we will see how that plays out. And then finally, I have breaking news in the world of Mormons behaving badly. Lori Vallow Daybell was convicted just this afternoon in Arizona of the Amazon guy just came, hence my dogs are going crazy again. Anyway, she was convicted again in Arizona of conspiracy to commit murder of her nephew, Brandon Bardot. This was her second trial in Arizona. Her first trial was conspiracy to commit murder of her husband, Charles Vallow. And if you followed this last trial, this third trial, it was kind of like she knew after this trial was over with, she's going to be on lock and key and not in the media or the public or anything again. She did all sorts of crazy stuff in this trial, and the judge was very, very, very patient, to the degree that he needs a gold star on his forehead in putting up with her nonstop shenanigans. So I don't believe
Why would the state of Arizona spend the resources to have a trial when she's already going to spend the rest of her life in prison?
let me answer that question for you.
I knew you could.
Now, there is a possibility, albeit very, very, very remote, that if her conviction in Idaho were to get overturned, she would get out of jail in Idaho. Now, if she were not convicted in Arizona, then she would be free. And Arizona has a time limit or a statute of limitations to file and prosecute these charges. And so they wanted to file and prosecute these charges basically to ensure the woman never gets out of jail. Because again, there's a very slim possibility that her conviction in Idaho would ever get overturned. But in the event that it did, if she is convicted in Arizona and her Idaho conviction got overturned, they'd ship her down to Arizona to serve her time in Arizona.
Yeah.
Now,
So
she is
I was thinking about this, and if I had to face the rest of my life in prison, do I want to just get comfortable in that Idaho jail cell, or do I think I'll spend 6 months in Arizona? I don't know. I mean,
I
it's like, are they air conditioned cells? I don't know.
I truly think she enjoys the attention. I really, really do because
I
she
think
was
you're
just
absolutely
off
right.
the rails in this last trial. And again, I just I kind of am a little burnt out on her crazy. And so I didn't follow it as closely as I have followed some of her other stuff. I do know she has not been sentenced in Arizona on either conviction. It was the same prosecutor. I don't recall if it was the same judge in each case. Probably. In any event, she will now be sentenced on both of those. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the same judge. She will now be sentenced on both of those. And once her sentencing is done, then the state of Idaho will go and reclaim her and relocate her out south of Boise. Well, because we have a women's prison out there, but I think she's going to be in Pocatello because there's a higher security facility for the women in Pocatello than there is out south of Boise. So she will be relocated to Idaho. All right, John, we are now almost to the end of our recording, which brings me to one of my favorite sections, favorite things, because I always love to see what everybody's favorite thing is. So I am anxiously awaiting for you to share with us your favorite thing.
All right. So this feels a little bit, if my whole life, the last month has been tied in with retirement and everybody just like wanting to know everything about what I'm going to do. And I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to be busy and stuff, but in preparation. So I've always had a little bit of a garden, but this year I thought I'm going to have a great garden. And so I built a little greenhouse. I'm a little bit of a carpenter. I built kind of a small greenhouse, and I had tomato seeds growing in February in Wyoming.
That's
So,
impressive.
yeah, that means that I've got tomato plants that are almost 4 feet tall now that they've, worked their way outside. And so I we also have
Okay,
wind here, and so I
John,
was thinking
we
I
have
need to have
lost you.
some more
Oh, there we
cages.
go.
I've
Now
always
you're
had
back.
this.
I
Nope,
lost you for a
I've
second, but now you're back.
okay.
Except now you're
So
not.
these
Oh
tomato
dear.
plants are just blowing over on the
Okay,
wind. And
listeners, this is the beauty of
hello, oh,
live
I
recording,
can hear
especially
me.
because our
Nope,
platform
we're
today was
gone.
having a couple of issues. John, are you back?
Uh,
Okay, he's coming in bits and snippets. I think we may have lost John. Well, at least we got through the majority of the recording. So, oh, there we go. He's
oh,
back.
okay. I'll stop calling you, and we'll just see. So quickly, I got lots of tomato plants. I needed them to not blow over. So I ordered these little sticks. They all put together, and you can build them, and you can build them as high as you want. And so they're perfect for my tomato plants. I think I lost you
Oh,
again. Okay,
okay.
but that's not the best part. So I had kind of a weird thing happened, and I had my grandsons for 6 weeks or 6 days. They thought these were like a Lego erector set. It was the greatest thing to have. I have like 200 of these things, and my grandsons were making towers up to the ceiling. They were trying to climb on them, but they didn't work. They were making cages for each other. It was the greatest, like, all boy thing. And so I'm going to order another set just to have for my grandkids to play with. And then some are going on my tomatoes. There you go. That's my
We're
favorite
having
thing.
more technical
So they work really
difficulties
well.
today. I've lost
How
John
about
again.
you?
Oh, there you go. Now you're back.
Hello, I'm losing you.
All right. I am definitely going to put a link to this incredible tomato steak that
I
can
hope you're
double as a big
talking
Lego
and I can't hear
erector set for
you.
kids
Doo
on the
doo
Twin
doo doo
Sisters
doo.
Instagram for you listeners out there. I am going to quickly share my favorite thing because, again,
This
John's
is
not
technical
popping up.
difficulties.
So, my favorite thing, here it is. This is
Ladies and
Sweet
gentlemen,
Tart Ropes. If you haven't had
fasten your
these are
seatbelts.
fantastic.
We
Now,
are
you might
going to
notice
go
this
on a
is an
wild
empty
ride.
package. My grocery store had them on sale. I bought this package. I put it in my home office. And then my 18-year-old daughter discovered this package in my home office. And so now the package is empty. I'm going to have to go back and buy some more. But this is my favorite candy that I'm currently enjoying right now. So, and we did officially lose John. He's now offline. So, listeners, I just want to thank you for joining us today and appreciate your support of TWIM. You can find us on Facebook. You can support us through Patreon. And we greatly appreciate you listening. Thank you.